to look at root cause and not just symptom. We need to ask ourselves, why do so many people feel such a desperate need to make their way to the United States from Latin America particularly? And if we look at that, we see America's fingerprints in far too many ways. I want to help the American people wisely and compassionately look in the mirror. If you look at the ways that our own foreign policy over the last 40, 50, 60 years have contributed to the economic destabilization of so many of these countries, I want to see the United States help restabilize what we in too many ways help destabilize. That will include removing the sanctions on Venezuela, removing the sanctions on Cuba, removing Cuba from the terrorist list, obviously, as well.
We
and
have
in
to leave
addition
it
to
there.
that, we should be giving far more aid. Thank you.
Marianne Williamson, 2024 Democratic presidential candidate on the ballot in New Hampshire. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
The viewpoints expressed in this program are the opinions of the people expressing them, and not necessarily those of Fresh Air Incorporated, its staff, or its board of directors.
Hi, this is Al McFarlane, host of The Conversation with Al McFarlane. You're listening to 98.3 FM, KFAI, Minneapolis. I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to have you along as well. Special thanks to our KFAI audience. Wonderful Amy Goodman show. She's on point every week. I'm happy to have the slot following her program. It's a great intro into what we believe we continue to deliver, and that's robust conversations about important topics of the day. I want to say that today I'm having as my co-host, my colleague and friend, Dr. Irma McClaurin. Irma, how are you? Good to see you. Where are you?
I am in Mobile, Alabama, where it's colder than usual, so I'm trying to keep warm.
Well, it's good to see you, and thank you for joining us. You know, I've got a couple of great guests today, and what I want to do is talk first to former City Council member Don Samuels. Don Samuels is now running to serve Minnesota's 5th district, primarily Minneapolis, in the U.S. Congress. He's running against the incumbent Ilhan Omar. We're going to talk about his candidacy and the political landscape. And the other guest following that is a young creative. Darrius Strong is a dancer, choreographer, a player in the creative scene in Twin Cities. We'll talk about what he means by movement and what he's doing in this sphere in Twin Cities. So all a good program. What's on your mind, top of mind, Irma? What kind of things are you focusing on?
Well, you know, the news that's been circulating and trending on both LinkedIn and Twitter has been, of course, the removal of Claudine Gay from Harvard, her what we call her involuntary resignation, and then tragically the suicide of Claudia Bailey, who was, you know, bullied. And I think this speaks to some of the issues that have arisen around some of these political campaigns as well, is that when we talk about certain aspects, whether it's clothing, whether it's how people look, it's generally women who are targeted. It's rarely that men, you know, are done. So I think we need to look at the gender dynamics of political campaigns and the kinds of conversations that people are having. I am working on a piece. I believe the Association of Black Anthropologists is going to issue a statement in support of Black women leaders. And so I want to wait to submit mine until that is ready. Awesome.
Awesome. Well, let me bring our first guest in. Don Samuels is has recently served as the CEO of a group called MicroGrants. It's a Minneapolis-based nonprofit organization that gives grants up to $5,000 to low-income people with potential. Don also served 3 terms on the Minneapolis City Council from 2003 to 2015, as well as 1 term on the Minneapolis Public Schools Board from 2015 to 2019. Prior to his work in politics, he had a 30-year career as a toy designer with some of the industry's largest companies, including Hasbro, Playskool, and Milton Bradley. And now, as I said, he's thrown his hat in the ring, challenging incumbent Ilhan Omar to represent Minnesota's 5th congressional district, which is mostly Minneapolis and some of the first-tier suburbs around it. Don, welcome. Good afternoon. Good to see you, my friend. How are you?
It's wonderful to be here, Al. It's good to see you again and to see Irma, to talk to her again after quite a few years. So
Yes.
Well, let's jump right in. Let's have you make the statement, Don, why you're running to represent Minnesota's 5th congressional district at this particular time, and what some would say is a troubled history.
you're correct, Al. These are troubled times. People are, as you say, you just referred to the bullying issue. It's happening at all ages. In fact, they're saying that 35% of all people have stopped talking to a family member or a friend because of politics. And the divisiveness is pervasive from top to bottom. And unfortunately, my opponent is part of that. And in fact, for instance, voting against the infrastructure bill, which is such a logically sensible bill, it's going to bring almost $6 billion to the state. She voted against that. She voted against Russian sanctions and against supporting the Ukrainians, and even locally taking a stand against the mayor, publicly having a press conference, elect anybody but. And so locally, nationally, internationally, she has been divisive. And I think my leadership style will bring a fresh, collaborative, pragmatic, democratic approach to leadership.
What are you telling voters and Minnesotans are the 3 biggest issues that the 5th congressional district is facing, and what are you saying you plan to do to address the top 3 issues?
Yeah, I think, of course, the number 1 issue continues to be safety, as people are still not comfortable sitting out on the plazas or going comfortably to the park, people looking behind them, especially personal attacks are still there, and of course, car thefts. And so we have to begin to deal with that issue. I'm going to Washington to make sure that the cities have the kind of resources to keep people safe, and that we hire the proper, just kind of young people to police our streets in the numbers sufficient to keep us safe. And then secondly,
let's stop on that one first, Don. It's a little more into safety. We'll come back to the other 2. Mm-hmm. And so what would you be doing differently than is presently being done? And what do you think the Congress can do to support a different strategy or a different approach to creating safety for the residents of 5th District?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to work with the mayors of the district. They're the ones whose feet are on the ground. You have to work with the cities to find out what they need in terms of resources. And the federal government has to get involved in funding those resources to hire and retain police officers that are responsible to their communities. And then, of course, you have to make sure that the laws on a federal level are enhanced in terms of policing. We know that we're banning no-knock warrants and chokeholds, but there are other opportunities that we can nationally create some basic policy and behavior conduct constraints that limit the abusive potential of police officers.
Okay. You were in the middle of challenging the public policy officials that wanted to radically reform or change or reduce or eliminate what we know as the criminal justice system. Where are we now, and how do you see, describe the position you took publicly in suing, I think, the city of Minneapolis over its policies?
Yeah. Well, when Sandra and I saw the group of 10 council members declaring the intent to abolish the police, we were aghast because we live in the most challenged part of the city. This is a pledge Sandra and I made. It's a pledge I made since college, to always live in a low-income community, African-American community, because I felt that this is where I can contribute the most. And I wanted to join the civil rights movement, basically. And so in doing that, we are in the place of greatest challenge. Gunshots every day were being heard, automatic gunfire, people being killed. Our children saw and our neighbors saw. And so when we heard defund the police, we were freaked out quite. And actually 70% of African Americans agreed with that position, that we should not abolish the police. And
I don't think that's what people were saying. And I think you had a range, you had a spectrum of what people meant by that. And what the press did was to take one soundbite from a group that said we want to get rid of police, which is not what everyone was saying. What people were saying is that we needed to divert some of the funding, not eliminate police, but divert some of the funding to resources around mental health for people who actually had the expertise to deal with people who were troubled. Because what was happening is that police were being called to do mental health interventions, and it's not their expertise. And unfortunately for many Black folk, they were taking a very extreme position. Whereas when they encountered mental health people who were white, they somehow seemed to have the ability to differentiate between what was a mental health crisis and what was really criminal or, dangerous activity. And I think that's what was the point. So I don't think we should take the press's soundbite and run with that. Defund the police meant simply diverting certain funds to more resources that would, in fact, enable them to cope with mental health issues. And so, I want to push back on that, because I think it really, sort of sidetracks us from the real issue, which is the violence that police have perpetrated against Black citizens. Okay. And we are citizens. We are innocent until proven guilty. And so whether we like it or not, criminals are, have the right to police protection as everyone else until they've actually been charged. But the presumption that Black people are automatically criminal, even when they're doing minor offenses, is something that is not only inhumane, it's unjust, and it should never occur. And what happens is that we have failed to understand that police is a category, a classification of a profession, but it does not protect that person from having implicit bias or overt biases, that when they put on that uniform, their biases do not disappear unless they've undergone training, education, and people who are putting them in check to say, hey, your biases are showing and you need to check yourself.
Don, what do you think voters are saying right now? What do you expect them to say as you bring your bid for their support forward in this election cycle?
Yes, and believe me, I understand the fine differences here in what people meant and what people said. But there is a group of people who wanted to defund the police.
Yes, but that doesn't represent everybody.
No,
So you take one group and you sort of generalize.
No, I'm not talking. I'm talking about the difference between me and Ilhan Omar. Ilhan Omar said to defund the police, and when President Obama said this is a catchy phrase that is threatening the actual consensus.
But you're taking sound like what she said. What did she actually mean?
Okay, Irma, that's what I'm getting to. When he said it's a snappy phrase that's actually threatening reform, the consensus to reform, she snapped back. It's not a catchy phrase. It's a policy demand. So we know that.
But what were the actual I think what I'd like to hear is what you mean
Right.
by, funding or defunding or changing
Yes,
the
so
funding.
what
What
I
do you
just
mean?
started out to say was what she meant, and now I'm going to tell you what I mean.
Mhm.
I believe that we have to have a both and solution. That is what I've advocated from the beginning. It has to be both enough police officers to keep us safe, because our young people are dying, and we do need to stay safe. And police officers are sorely limited in numbers and in the quality of them. And so we have to improve the quality of our police. And I thank the young people, especially, who kept our feet to the fire to say that we must change. They stood on the lines, they marched, and I was in some of those marches. I was on the bridge when that whole thing broke out with a big truck. I was marching on the way to the 3rd precinct with my picket signs when Sandra said, "I don't like what this feels like. We should turn back."
Could you
So
say
I'm
this
all
more
for trans reform.
specifically about what policies or changes you would want to see in this both and scenario? What
Yes,
you are talking about, not
yes.
what
I think we should
anyone else.
renegotiate. I think the contracts should be renegotiated to remove some of the protections that the police officers who are delinquent are able to hide behind. Okay, that means protecting them from prosecution, from accountability, rehiring them when they're fired by the chief. 50% of all who are disciplined by the chief are restored to the department, or who are fired are restored. That is all because of the contract agreements, and those things need to be renegotiated. No matter what laws you have, or if you're going to renegotiate firings, then the discipline is reversed. So this thing goes very deep. We have to make sure that we hire properly, that we have the right vetting of officers psychologically, so that we don't have abusive people in office as police officers. And we have to have vetting, and we have to make sure that when there are signs of breakdown in their mental status, that there's psychological help for them, and when they cannot be helped, they're fired and not rehired.
That's for the officers. From the community's point of view, any policy changes that support what the community has articulated or
Yes.
is articulating as
Absolutely.
a priority?
We need mental health workers, that they need to be part of the force for peace, and that they need to be in numbers sufficient to accompany police officers, or to be accompanied by police officers, sometimes at a distance, so people won't get hyped up, and that all peaceful methods should be tried before any violence is necessary, and that we cannot continue to wreak violence or to criminalize everyone because there are mental health issues, there are addiction issues, and those have health solutions.
Or because they're Black, simply because of that
Absolutely.
one factor. What I don't hear is people talking about, and let me just say this, I'm always suspicious of political candidates who start out and say, well, I'm not really, a bully or this, but always start out critiquing. I prefer that you begin with what you're going to do or what you're proposing, and then have the critique come in later. I'm always suspicious of people who always begin their arguments with trampling on the other person, which to me is a form of bullying. It's political bullying, but it's bullying nonetheless, as opposed to just saying, here's what I'm advocating. And so what I heard you say is renegotiating contracts, having better scrutiny or vetting of police officers. But I also heard you say, and what I don't hear is, in addition to police, what are the other things? For example, when I lived in Minneapolis and I was at URA, one of the things that I discovered in looking at the health things is that while the majority of people who had diseases that required like dialysis were African Americans, most of the facilities were actually not located in or near their neighborhood. We also had the largest out-of-home placement of Black children, into foster care, which was not the case with white children. And so I'd like to hear about policies that don't have to do with the police, That's not about critiquing the
Well,
person who you're running.
let's come back because we talked about three things we've asked Don Samuels to
Okay.
sort of talk about. So Don, number 2 and number 3.
Yeah, number 2 is homelessness and affordability of housing. We can't have a major American city, the richest country in the world, have tent cities on our streets. And the disparity between the rich and the poor and wealth concentrated in the hands of a few is causing a desperation at the bottom where people cannot afford basic resources for basic life.
But how do you change that? What specific policy? Because that's the nature of capitalism. So what would you do specifically if you were in office to shift that dynamic?
Yeah, Irma, I got to describe the problem. Otherwise, I don't need to be elected.
I think everybody knows what homousness is. So I'm just asking, what policy would you put in place?
Irma, I feel like you're the other candidate. I'm dating you.
There you go again. I'm simply asking you, what specifically would you do? I think all of us know what homelessness is.
Go ahead, Don.
Yeah. So I believe that the federal government needs to get involved again in providing affordable housing. And in fact, it was during the Reagan administration that I remember specifically him saying that communities need to take care of their own. And when he was a child, that's how it was. The church took care of the poor and the indigent. And so they closed all of these facilities. And that's when you started to see people show up on the side of the street when I lived in New York at the time in cardboard boxes and so on. It's heartless. It's inhumane. And it's a national crisis. It's not just local. So there needs to be a national solution. Federal government must again provide more money to house our homeless and to make housing affordable for those of low income. Any economy that has that those huge gaps in the safety net must realize that there's something wrong with how we're doing things. We need wage equality. We need minimum wage standards, and we need support for those folks who are falling below the cracks. And ultimately, we need education that works for low-income children so that they can be properly trained in the growing industries and get jobs that are sustainable and provide lifetime of and career employment.
Number 3 is what, Don? Let's go through your third option.
Number 3 is our democracy. That we see what's happening no, I'm sorry, I got that mixed up there. Number 3 is our economy. Mm-hmm. We see the problem with affordability, not just of housing, but of basic goods and services, especially for low-income people and the middle class. Again, this is the whole issue of the wealth gap and people not making sustainable wages. And so I'm going to Washington to put my shoulder to the wheel to cooperate with the wiser folks in the economy who are, if you ask 100 economists what the solution is, you get 100 different answers. So I'm not going to expound on that. I'll just say that whatever solutions we come up with, they will have to address the lifestyle of low-income people, especially in the middle class, to make sure that incomes are sustainable and livable, and that there's a good safety net for those who fall beneath the cracks.
Do you have a concern, Don Samuels, about the state of our democracy, about the ability of the democratic process to survive, given the turbulence that lies ahead on the national and therefore, I think, local political landscapes?
They say a city divided against itself cannot stand. Neither can a nation. And I'm concerned that there is a retrograde force in the nation that is frightened by the positive changes that are taking place and seeing it as a nation evolving into something in which they do not have a superior position or do not see them, or they're just simply afraid of change. But we need to stay the course because the changes that have occurred, especially through the Democratic Party over the last 60 years, have been incredible. We've had our civil rights, voting rights, women's rights, LGBTQ rights. We're attacking climate change, and we consider health, universal health care, a human right. And we must stay the course and not be deterred by those who are frightened, because in the end, freedom and rights for all will prevail.
Irma, what
Could you,
questions do you have?
yes, could you speak to, I mean, you set out some very wonderful things in terms of the unhoused or, homeless. Could you say how you intersect with state policies? Because sometimes it's very hard to get these things passed at the national level. It takes time. They go through bills, people have to negotiate. How would you impact what is happening in the state of Minnesota, which is one of the wealthiest? It has a tremendous amount of wealth, but it doesn't trickle down. What would you propose to get that trickle down to occur to address some of these issues at the state level?
Well, I can't have anything to do with the state, as you know, but I will have a relationship with the president of the Senate, Bobby Joe Champion. I have a relationship with other folks at the state level, and I know that some of that money is going to come directly through the state. So we want to make sure that we hold the states accountable to deliver those funds where they're targeted.
That's a wonderful word. I love the word accountability, except no one defines it. Could you say a bit about what you would do to hold states accountable, like what that would look like?
Well, I'm all about outcomes. I was in the private sector for 30 years. So if you don't deliver, you get fired. There's none of this. We tried, and it's hard. It's like, you don't have a job, buddy. So, we need a little bit more of that kind of attitude in the public sector, that you must deliver on your commitment. And so we're going to look at outcomes, not what you're doing, not how much you're spending, but how many less people are on the street, how many more people are housed, how many more units are built. Those are the kind of questions we ask.
And towards that end, because I think that's a very powerful, way of looking at it, how will you hold the National Democratic Party accountable for its failure to actually deliver on its promises? That, we know that Black women were disproportionately, influential in getting President Biden, elected. And yet we don't see the reciprocity in terms of policies or funding that impacts this particular constituency. How will you hold the National Democratic Party, accountable?
Well, certainly, I live in a largely African American community. I worked hard to bring resources here successfully, disproportionately to any other part of the city, and I am going to have the same attitude in a Congress, to make sure that resources go where they're most needed, where they're most deserved, where they're most historically denied. And that means working with the Congressional Black Caucus and continuing to strengthen the resolve to bring resources to the African American community, to make sure that that the denials and the harm that was done is also repaired through policy.
Don, before we go, let me have you take a moment to look at Connecticut. I think we want to sort of make an assessment of where the nation is right now. And what are you observing? What are you thinking? How do you analyze the coronation almost of Donald Trump? It may happen, it may not happen, it probably will happen. And the challenges within the Democratic Party, particularly with, Dean Phillips and others questioning the potential to win with a Biden-Harris ticket against Trump in particular. What do you think? How's it look to you?
Well, I think that there's a backlash against, as I said, the changes that have happened in this country as the country is getting browner. People who were held in the margins are coming out getting the light of day. And we are now going to share the goods, the rights, like universal health care, with folks who were thought to be undeserving. That is frightening to some people. It's not the America they signed up for. And so Donald Trump comes along, and he's an attractive option. He's going to bring back, to make America what it was again. And the word great is thrown in there, but that's not, those of us who have seen the progress over the years know that America is at its greatest when all of us are participating. And so, yes, it is an attempt to roll back the clock. And we have to understand that the solution to that is to continue to be inclusive, because young people are looking for a new kind of nation that is truly inclusive. They're going to school with kids of all complexions and colors, and in a way unprecedented in the past. And so they're expecting their churches, their politicians, and all to carry values that include everyone. That's why the protests after George Floyd was so diverse, because those young people had been in school and in college and in the workplace with people of all stripes. And we need to stay the course, because youth is on our side, our immigrants are on our side, our people of color as Democrats are on our side, and the folks who are, it's unsustainable what the Republicans are trying to do. Older people die first, and change is inevitable. We're fulfilling our Constitution, and the closer we get to it, is the better we're going to feel about ourselves. Stay the course, and this pushback will fade.
Don, thank you so much. Good to see you again. I'll have you back again and again. I think this conversation is important, and I appreciate your voice. Don Samuels is a candidate for the U.S. Congress from Minnesota's 5th District. He's challenging the incumbent Ilhan Omar to be the Democratic Party's nominee, and he wants to be the congressman from District 5. Don, thank you so much.
Thank you, Al, and thank you, Irma, for your tough questions there.
Of course. That's why Al has me on here.
Thank you, Don, and we'll see you later.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Irma, I wanted you to take a second to talk about this, how your read on the primary today out east. What's your read on the political soup that's boiling as we speak?
I think this is a challenging time for all of us. Don, Samuels alluded to it, but we are in a moment in time when what Donald Trump is promoting, and some of the other folks were promoting, is what I call the reclamation of whiteness. They want to revert back to a moment in time when white privilege was supreme. Black folks knew their place. We were okay with being at the back of the bus. We may have mumbled and grumbled, but we went back there anyway. And what they failed to understand is that moment has passed. I'm fond of saying you can't put the black genie back in the box. Okay, that's number one. We're not going back in. One, we are much more educated than we were.
Before you go further, let me ask you, how willing are our adversaries to do what they think may be necessary?
Oh, I think it's necessary.
It's not just us.
No, I think by any means necessary that they will do whatever they can. They will use their power, their privilege, their money, their institutions to move us backwards, if at all possible. And we just have to, I'll borrow from Donald Samuels, we have to stay the course. Now, the question becomes, are the people who are representing us at national and state levels the right people? I think people need to understand that this is not just about these very public and high profile positions of Congress and Senate, and state representatives. It's also the judges. It's every single thing that is on that ballot becomes absolutely critical.
On
whether
every
it's
level, yeah.
everything is becoming critical. So that means the people who are, I'm trying to remember some of the things, agricultural something,
Board of
people who,
Taxation and Estimates.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
People need to
Mhm.
pay attention to who is putting, being put in these positions. Because what Donald Trump did while nobody was watching is that at the state level, he appointed people as judges who had zero experience, who were young. So it's not like they're going to go away very quickly. And now you've got all these state judges who are in charge of making determinations about policies and stuff. So I think we have to pay attention to every single position and educate ourselves about what people's platforms are and vote. We have to vote, even if it looks like it's the lesser of two evils or that it's not really a choice. We still have to vote.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. My co-host today, Dr. Irma McClaurin. She's the Culture and Education Editor of Insight News, a former president of a historically Black university, and a person who has created pioneering work in the arena of creating a Black feminist archive, the Irma McClaurin Black Feminist Archive at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. We'll talk about that as we go along today. Let's bring in our next guest. He's Darrius Strong. He's an accomplished choreographer, a dancer, an educator based here in Twin Cities. His creative work has garnered recognition and been featured in prestigious venues such as the Walker Art Center, their Choreographers Evening, and Rhythmically Speaking. He's the founder and artistic director of Strong Movement and director of the hip hop program at Elevate Performing Arts Center. He continues to push boundaries and inspire others through his innovative approach to movement. Notable highlights of his career include being featured in the 2015 New Griot Festival and an American Standard Billboard advertisement in New York City's Times Square in 2016. In 2017, he received the Momentum New Works Recipient Award, acknowledging his outstanding contributions to the field. He's also served as the movement director for esteemed theater organizations such as the Guthrie Theater and 10,000 Things Theater. He lends his expertise and artistic vision to enhance stage performances. His choreographic talents are sought by renowned dance companies, including Threads Dance Project, Flying Foot Forum, Alternative Motion Products, TU Dance, and James Sewell Ballet, where he's created captivating works. Additionally, he's dedicated the past 7 years to bringing hip-hop knowledge and technique to Anoka Middle School for the Arts. He's making a significant impact on the next generations of dancers. Beyond the realm of dance, he has made his mark as a movement director for musicians as well. He's collaborated with notable bands such as None Above, and has provided movement direction for various cover bands who work prestigious galas around town. Recognized for his artistic excellence, he's a recipient of the 2019 Jerome Hill Fellowship and the 2022 Choreographer McKnight Fellowship, those solidifying his position as a trailblazer in the dance community. Brother, good to see you. Welcome to the conversation. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me. I'm excited. So
thank you for being here. So let's talk about this journey that you're on as a dancer. Sort of talk about where it starts and where you are and how that sets you up for the vision that you're working out right now.
Yeah, I was born in Chicago, so Calumet City out that way, south side Chicago. Moved to Minnesota when I was 7.
Dr. Irma is your home girl.
Yeah.
Don't say that. I seen that head.
Remote projects. Hey, West Side.
Say that. So I'm a product of that community. I think about, and I grew up dancing with my brother. So moving here at 7, often we just dance a lot in our living room and for talent shows for our school and things like that. And then, at a young age, I realized how therapeutic movement was for me. That it was necessary that I create. And when I wasn't creating, I would be going through these just different things going in life when it came down to the conscious and also the support from family. So just finding that joy that dance brought me, that's just something I held on to kind of moving forward. Always kind of been fascinated with the human body. I know I had a big dream to be a heart surgeon. That was my thing. I went to Everett Hills Community College to do my generals, and my plan was to transfer to the University of Minnesota. And I was kind of a big head when it came to dance. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna get all A's when I get there. I'm gonna transfer to the medical program. And when I got in there, it was a little bit more challenging than that. I had to take some ballet classes, some modern dance classes, things I wasn't really familiar with. I was a big hip hop head, big hip hop kid. Me and my brothers did a lot of animation, pop, and a lot of things like that. But through that program, I just was so fascinated with how much I loved movement, and just the study behind it and the language of dance. So just kind of getting a lot of opportunity through that program. I think it took about 2 years in that program before I fell into my body. I remember kind of almost dropping out of that program a few times just because I didn't see myself in that program. I seen a couple brothers in there who were quite powerful performers, but they also came from studio dance. They came from that training. I came from street style, so they didn't really come from any training. But I did quite a bit of teaching in hip hop before I even went to that program. So I remember one year I kind of really fell into my body, moving from where I am, and I started to get a lot of opportunities performing for guest artists who came in, and also recognized for my work to be represent the college in these different college dance festivals. From that moment on, I kind of knew I wanted to be a director, a choreographer at the time, and just thinking about how do you tell stories through movement, how do we go about that? And I had a lot to say, my body had a lot to say. So really discovering that as I graduated college and moving into the community, what are different ways I can tell stories through movement, and what is my dance philosophy? That continue to grow. It's always going to be something that I'm working on defining more and more. What is dance? Now I call it movement. I think movement, people get a little intimidated by the word dance, So I think that really thinking about movement really allows for all of us to see ourselves in it. We walk, we run, we sit. These pedestrian movements, I really start with those movements in order to create bigger movement vocabulary for people. So I just found the joy with even working with not only the stuff you mentioned in the bio there, which I appreciate, but working with beginners, people who don't see themselves dancing. I love the idea that I can show someone they got some rhythm, or they can express themselves through movement. And it's just been essential for me to be in these communities, being a young Black brother, to really see these, so these kids can see a leader in the space and see themselves in that. So that's kind of really the journey as we continue to push forward.
Well, I love the language that you use. I think you talk about the language of dance, the language of movement. I'd love to hear you talk more about that. And I love that you described your experience as falling into my body. Describe that. What do you mean by that? And how did it happen? What was the event, or was it a process over a period of time?
Yeah, I mean, as far as with movement, and I'll talk about that, I just remember, hip hop has a certain look to it, different styles that comes down to it. That's what modern dance kind of opened my mind. I remember seeing Bill T. Jones' work come here to the Walker Art Center. He's a Black choreographer, but he was telling, it was called Story Time. And he was basically sitting in the middle of the stage, just still for a moment. Like I thought it was some type of figure. I didn't think he was real. He was reading his book, and all of a sudden he started to move halfway through the performance. And I was just mind blown. Like, okay, so stillness is powerful. Sitting in the space and what presence is powerful. Like just having that integrity in the body is also very powerful. So just finding ways to once again relate to the people watching the arts. I think often we go to dance shows and want to see dance. But I think the most important thing is the conversation that dance is. When I'm in the space with my dancers and working with any choreographer, I'm working with movers, the choreography is a conversation with their bodies. And we talk a lot about the story we're trying to tell, although we're all having a different take on that story, but a very similar kind of follow through with the line. The conversation then it gets translated to the audience and viewers. And they got to be able to see themselves in the work in order to for it to impact them way beyond the weekend of the performance. So I think about the idea of that, once again, the language of movement and the power it has to create change, the power it has to create community and conversation, once again. So I think that is really the essential, the kind of the grounds for my work, just because I try not to label it unless I'm teaching a specific class, whether I'm teaching a hip hop or modern coordinating technique class. I'll try to use some terminology, but when it comes to movement, I'm trying to look at it from those perspectives. And, you know, I was talking about when I broke through at the University of Minnesota, and I realized when I fell into my body, I started to realize that I started thinking of the movement is just movement. You know, ballet was hard for me, thinking about sitting at the bar doing time dues and turns, and we're going to do this adagio phrase in this classical ballet. But as soon as I dropped the realm of what the structure of the style was and the fact that they had this history, I started thinking of these movements in my body. And that's when I started to take in more and started to get these opportunities, because I dropped that box that I was in about what is dance, you know. So that's kind of the journey of, you know, why I'm calling it movement and what I mean by that.
What's the connection between movement and freedom for you as an African-American or as an African in the West? When you think about movement, your discovery about the body's potential capability, if you take that out on an exponential level, what does movement mean for the people? And what does movement for the people mean for freedom? Do you think about that at all?
I do quite often, you know. And what I mean by movement and freedom is, it's, you know, I was interested in listening to the previous Don there. It's just amazing to hear that conversation. But movement in general, with your voice and with your body. I think I talked about trauma in our bodies. Like, when we move, you know, okay, so I got a little daughter, she's 4. You know, she started to grow up. We talk about the fact that our kids, they can't talk at 1, 2. They use their body to be like, I need it, you know, all that stuff. So you gotta be like, okay, what do you want? What do you need? And figure that out. I'm a firm believer as we get older, we start to learn how to talk. We then start to neglect the language of the body. We don't necessarily listen to the body. And that's why, you know, we talk about therapy and talking about these different things to help us generate what's happening in our body. So I think when I think about moving and move my body in a way and not speaking, it then creates freedom in the body to then be self, to be truly yourself and be authentic with that, and constantly going back to the grounds of identity, you know. So I think that we're just in a period of time right now where people are really fighting to find identity and understanding the trauma in the body, because some people don't even know. You know, I did a workshop at the JDC when I was my final year at the University of Minnesota. It was just so profound to me to see how many young Black brothers was inside this JDC, but they had no idea they can do this as a profession, that they had this natural talent. You know, I bring a combo, they started adding to that, and to see the joy it brought to them and to their face, and understand that they had this power that they had in their bodies that I don't have. I have my integrity within my body. To see that they realized that within themselves, I think that really made a difference and hopefully made an impact. So I do think that the idea of
JDC is juvenile detention. What is JDC?
Juvenile Detention Center.
Yeah.
In Minneapolis. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So just thinking about even doing work in those spaces and how you know, movement gives voice. You know, it reminds us that we have a voice to continue going forward. I went through when the whole movement happened, George Floyd murder. After that moment, I got pulled over by the cops, and I was pulled over by gunpoint at that time. And then I started being used as a kind of a puppet, if you will, I feel like, in this community, where news channels started reaching out to me, but hey, we'll talk about this. But they had their own motive behind this interview. So I had, you know, me going through this thing, through this trauma that I was going through, and I had a lot of past trauma from Chicago that I had went through as well that came back. I almost shut down for a year. It was hard for me to go teach and put on the face like I'm okay, and then leave and then go to my car and basically cry, go into the next thing and go to these things, because the man, I didn't feel like I had an outlet to really speak about what the damage that did to me as a person. But that also taught me that it was important for me to dance. Now, get back in the studio and start to move, and they would move me through these moments in time and got me here. Well, I'm really feeling even more integrity in my voice when I'm talking about choreography and movement and what that does for the person, for the people.
I've used the phrase, I'm not sure where I first heard it, but it's like some people dance to know. that there's a certain knowing that can come through movement or dance, and certain people arrive at their own sense of consciousness through the movement that is described as dance. Irma, what do you think? What are you thinking about this conversation so far?
Well, I'm loving it because one of my coaching clients and mentees is Mark Broomfield, who is a dancer and choreographer, and he is doing, his book should be coming out in the next year or so from Routledge on Passing is Almost Straight. And he did an ethnography of the Alvin Ailey Dance Company, but he actually created not only a course, but a micro-credential called Performance as Social Change. And his tagline is moving minds, moving bodies, moving souls. So this whole thing of movement I've been hearing about, and there's a YouTube on it. I don't know if Cooper can bring it up. I sent him the link. But just what he also did was to step outside the dance department and to create a course that you did not need to be a dancer per se, but that you just needed to do movement and to give people that kind of freedom. And I think we forget that the body actually holds in it a lot of trauma and a lot of history, and the ability to be able to express that. I do some Qigong once in a while, and there's one exercise called chest opening exercise. And what it basically says is that this is what you need to do when there are things you want to say, but you can't say. So this movement is actually a Qigong movement that allows you to breathe and then get out of your body those things that you have been suppressing. You know, and so I think it's very powerful.
Yeah, I love that you said that too about that sternum opening up in that space. I don't know much about Qigong and the terminology behind it, but I can't speak to, growing up as a hip hop kid, things are very much has a lot of tension in it. I'm in here a lot, and I think that was one of the biggest things. Working under Tony Pearson, which is artistic director at Two Dance. But she was actually in that program at the time, but taking her class and thinking about this one day when there's some movement, I've been repeating this movement, but there was a day where there was an outburst of emotion coming from my body. And once again, I talk about tears. This is something I have to really get, as a person, as a Black man, I have to understand that it's okay for me to cry. And that's one thing that I have to kind of get, it's okay, I need to let that out. But I do remember taking the time to then move and stretch my body in ways I haven't, opening my sternum and using my body in that way, and it unlocked a lot of different things for myself that I was not aware that was there until that had happened, right? And they continued to work through it from that point forward. So I love that you made that comparison as well. Yeah.
Right.
Darrius, you may be working with Children's Theater Company. Talk about what you're doing over there.
Well, some movement direction, man. I'm just trying to add a little spice to this production. I think that Alice is not necessarily a musical, but it does have a lot of movement components to it. How does a caterpillar move? How does a cat move when it has a little bit of a majestic feel to it? So just really trying to find ways to add a little bit of movement in there, a little bit of dance. There's a couple of different dance numbers that break out, but then to once again translate the language that I have to the actors so that they can see themselves moving through the movement rather than thinking of it just lines and blocking. Right, so I'm really taking the time to kind of go through this and finesse the work they've done. They've done this work before back in 2013, but they did desire to have more movement in it and more captivating moments. So I'm just kind of working with the director, Peter, and kind of going through each scene and adding different elements such as that. There's a moment in there which the caterpillar that Alice meets, and it's actually it's 7 other actors acting as the caterpillar. So it's the lead actor, but also you got a body behind the actor. So how do we make this caterpillar wrap around Alice and submerge her in this world, in this dream that she's in, and find ways to really make that, once again, be innovative with movement through this production,
I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane, having a great conversation with Darrius Strong. He's leading the movement element of the upcoming or current production of the Alice in Wonderland performance at Children's Theater. What are the dates for that?
And can I just briefly say that there's
Go
a book out called Alice in Wonderland Remix, and it's by the person who's an illustrator. I don't know if you can bring it up real quick, Cooper, but it's like a pop version of Alice. So you may want to take a look at that because the kids may enjoy that. And it's got pictures of Oprah and all kinds of things. And hip hop folks look like, who were some of the hip hop artists. So it's kind of a cool thing. It's apparently available at Walmart's, but they might kind of seeing that as they're going through this script. Okay.
I love that. Thank you for putting me on that. I appreciate that. I'm definitely going to read that and grab that book. That looks amazing.
And the person who did it is a Black artist. He's an illustrator. So
okay.
He's got some other stuff out there. But I just thought, as you were saying that, boy, wouldn't it be cool if they read that version of it too?
Right. Yeah. That's a lot of things we got to change in theater too, right? With the characters and the storyline, and seeing ourselves in it, just
how difficult is that? How important is it? You said there's a lot of things we have to change. How difficult is it to change? What kind of resistance is there or embrace is there to the reinterpretation or the further refinement of an idea that had its birth in a generation ago under different understandings, but we've moved, we've changed, and things aren't that way anymore. How difficult is it for you as a director to introduce change?
I think that it's always. I'm a younger cat too. When I walk through the space, I'm 33, but I look a lot younger than 33. So when I walk in there, I'm usually the youngest cat on the board or whatever walking through the space. So I already have to hop over a hurdle to showcase my knowledge on what I know. But then once again, that's when the confidence is kicked in. Just being confident on my choices and things like that. When it comes to theater, some of these roles have been written. I think the hurdle comes to the audition process. You get artists of color coming out the audition for these roles. So once again, we can see them in these roles, and kids feel they can play these roles. And when they're written for an artist of color, a Black artist, if you will, too, we can't see ourselves in it. So it's not appealing sometimes. So that hurdle is making sure that we bring up some of these amazing artists in this community and put them in these spaces. Some of these playwrights, I'm not a playwright, but I know a few playwrights who are changing the game when it comes to that, who are really pushing at the boundaries of theater and finding ways to create more diverse plays and musicals within this community and beyond. So I do think that it's what we see and how we push forward with that.
And in some ways, Al and Darrius, this is what we did at UROC. We had to change criteria. We had to change the things that we were measuring them by, because those measurements were the ways in which people got excluded. And so I'm sure that as you're looking and evaluating sort of who is able to do this particular role, you've had to rethink like the criteria of that you're using. They may not be able to do on point, right? Or something like that, but they may be able to do other kinds of things. So, to get this kind of transformation, in movement, we have to rethink what that is about.
Yes.
And
Darrius, let me ask you to think about hip hop, the movement of hip hop through the culture, not only your profession, but in the world, what you're thinking, and how do you see yourself as having an impact on the all of existence through the power of the hip hop experience?
Well, I'm a storyteller, man. But I like to tell a grill. All hip hop artists, I feel like storytellers, MCs tell stories through their rhymes. You know what I mean? So I think that I'm constantly pushing at keeping the foundation, keeping some people, and especially the history. That's one of my biggest things. When I go teach class here in Minnesota, I'm very much talking about the founders of these different styles. And the different styles, a lot of people, if you go in the suburbs, you'll find out that they put hip hop in one category. Oh, we're doing hip hop. I'm like, no, hip hop got many different styles, and it has different, it just has different genres. You got to find out what that is.
Regionality.
Right? And that's what I've taken upon myself from a lot of, have a big hip hop community here too. House of Dance, Cypher Side, these two organizations are really pushing some of the knowledge behind hip hop, and that's something that's always skipped over. So I do think that pushing the idea of keeping history, but also being innovative with how we tell stories with hip hop movements. How is it presented on stage? It's not always frontal, but how can we tell the story so the audience can look in on the story rather than us performing for them? So the idea of like flipping how we see it and present it, but also the understanding of it and throughout our communities, and understanding that hip hop is a social justice tool. You know what I'm saying? When it started, it is a social justice tool. It's talking about the problems in the communities to these people. And I think about how that's been transformed and thinking about how that's been molded. But I do desire to continue to bring some of these, use hip hop as that platform to speak about certain issues, speak about certain things that are common within Black families and young people as well.
Darrius, we're out of time. Look, time goes so quickly, but thank you so much. Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the show is at Children's Theater from February 15th to March 31st. Check it out. Alice in Wonderland. Darrius Strong, Irma McClaurin. Thank you both so much. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.